Hi everybody, welcome to Book 2, Night 23 of the Orphan's Tales Live Quarantine Reading Series. Sorry I had to miss last week. It's not been an awesome couple of weeks around here, so I really apologize for the missed readings of late. We've had several deaths in the family, and it's just, it's been a lot to deal with. And now we have no water. The island water is out, and other small fires are happening. And it's just so much. And I have so much work to do, and all I want to do is just crawl into a hole for a week. But I can't. No rest for the wicked and/or freelancer. So yeah, I apologize for that. I will try not to miss too many more before, as we draw pretty close to the end here. Like, we've only really got about 150 pages left, a little less 120 pages left. So yeah, so that's what's going on over here. It's all a mess. And the world is also a mess. It goes without saying. You know, that was quite a show last night on that debate stage. Good times. Anyway, so I'll hop into my intro and we can get into this reading. No idea what's coming. I didn't take a peek this time, so whatever voices come out, come out. Oh, the lipstick is Smashbox, something to do with pumpkins, because it's almost October. I should have looked more carefully. I'll let you know next time. Anyway, so, as always, this is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. For legal reasons, this is a play. You can get music based on these stories at sjtucker.com. You can get copies of them at your local independent bookseller. If you would like to patronize my local independent bookseller, it's printbookstore.com in Portland, Maine. You can find me on Twitter and on Patreon, both at Cat Valenti. There's a big new essay up on Patreon right now, and 2 more rewards coming out in the next couple of days, because I've gotten behind on everything because of what a rubbish September it was. And you can, tomorrow night, at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, come and see me and S.J. Tucker doing a house concert together across time zones. She's in Arkansas, I am in Maine. We are putting it together on onlineconcertthing.com tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. It's going to be the old band back together. About the only good thing about the last 4 weeks, Sebastian's birthday, and putting this concert together for you guys. So there's going to be awesome exclusive fiction goodies in the merch table, and SJ singing songs based on a huge variety of my books, including some I haven't even ever heard live before. So super exciting for me as well. She's got songs based on Radiance and space opera that have not come out on albums yet. It's going to be super cool. So please all come and tell your friends to come tomorrow night at 8 p.m. On onlineconcertthing.com. This is easily the coolest thing I'll be doing online for a while. So please come and get your very, very difficult to find. I dug up some awesome fiction that has only appeared in like print anthologies nobody's looked at in a couple of years, and some other little goodies for you guys. So if you come, it will be worth your while. Oh, thank you. Someone said that they love my books, and I don't want to read that. I'm an incredible author and an inspiration. Thank you. That's really kind. That's really kind and lovely to hear as I battle my way through the work I'm doing right now. I'm glad to have been of some use. You can ask me questions after the reading. Works best if you think of them before I finish reading, so that there's no dead air. You can catch up with the archive on YouTube at Cat Valenti Live. Thank you to everybody who helped me to get to 1,000 subscribers, which makes my life a lot easier. A lot of features on YouTube are locked down to subscriber count, so makes life much better. And If you are so moved and want to put something in the witch's hat, very witchy now that it's October, there's a tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and my website, which is catherinemvalenti.com. Times are very tight for everyone. I am well aware, particularly for anyone who's a freelancer. So if you are moved to give anything to support this series and the rest of my work, please do so. And thank you so much to Heather, who tipped me last week. You are my hero. You cannot know how deeply appreciated even the pennies are. So thank you so much. And I will thank anybody who tips me on the next stream. Yeah, so see, and this is how terrible things are. This is all the wine that's left in the house. That's it, right there. It's so sad. It's just tragic. But the store closes at 7 now because of COVID. And I can't know my wine needs before 7 p.m. I've been working all day long. I've been up, I went to bed at 4 last night because I was working so late, and I've been up since like 9 working. So I couldn't estimate that. That's a ridiculous thing to expect of me. Hannigan's, deli, and sundries. So that's all the wine there is. We'll just have to get through this trying time together. For those of you, oh no, I think my little dog ear disappeared. As I mentioned before, this is, oh, we'll hit it today. This is actually my reading copy from back in the day when SJ and I used to tour around the very show you can see tomorrow night at 8 on onlineconcertthing.com. And I can tell that because of all the little torn pieces of paper I have to mark where I used to do readings before her particular song. So we're going to hit one of them today. Ooh, yes. We're going to hit one of them, and I will play the song that goes with it. Those of you who are SJ fans will know immediately, as soon as I say the tale, what song goes with it. And I will play it at the beginning of the next stream. All right. We got vermin today, spiders and mice and everything else. Let's get into it. The Weaver's Tale. It's page 383, if you're reading at home. I spin each thread to its natural length, and when it's ended, and I exhort it to wind no further. I do not sever it before its time, simply because it would make a neater sleeve. Everything I weave is neither more or less than what it longed to become. I was the last to step down out of the sky. They went down like a rain of light, and they changed in their going, and I did not wish to change. I saw nothing there I liked so well as the hole in the sky, the hole the sky had made for me, its cool edges and its darkness. I wandered in the dark long after they had gone, an orphan in an empty house. It had once been so full of light, and now the stars that stayed hung like lanterns far from each other and silent. Far off in the reaches of the black there is a field of grass. I could tell you that it goes on forever, but only a child believes that anything goes on forever. But there is a place where the dark becomes speckled with light, thicker and thicker until there is nothing but light, on and on and on. These are stars too, these speckles, grass stars who lie over the dark like blades and wait for the part of the sky that bellied out into the world to wander through and nose them just once, just a bit, just the slightest brush of her skin. There are so many of them who chose this. I suppose you cannot blame them. They are not the only orphans who have told themselves that if they make up the house very nicely, Mother will come home. I went walking there once, long after the brightest ones left. I was lonely. Can I be blamed if in the dark I went toward the thing which was brightest? I went walking first through the swirls of grass stars, their tiny faces beaming with anticipation that never wanes, never for a moment. I walked through the fields into the marshes and the rivulets of pooled light, where the stars were nearly to my waist, waving in nameless winds, waving in the dark. And I tried to step carefully. I tried. But they are so thick and so wide and Sometimes I did step on the grass. For that I can say I'm sorry. It crumbled beneath me, falling in brilliant shards out of the sky, sharp and screaming, falling out of the sky like glass. And when the shards broke, shall I say I should not have gone? Shall I say I was punished, a little lost girl who has been told not to walk in the gardens, not to ruin the flowers with her muddy feet? When they broke, their light splashed out and into my eyes, and my eyes were washed away in it, and I saw nothing but light. I have seen nothing since but light. But in that light I could see a kind of shape, a shape which seemed to me something like the world, and a world which seemed something like me. There were things which wove, and I could not see them, but I could see their weaving, how tiny and diamond strung, how intricate and perfect. And I wanted to weave that way. I wanted to weave bigger things and greater things, and as this wish formed in me like a spindle gathering flax, my arms opened up into 8, and silk pooled in my belly. But I did not want to become a spider. I only wanted to weave. I stopped before I could grow small and black and many-eyed. What use are many eyes to the blind? And so at last I too came down from the heavens, blind and wet and small, cut through with the grass rain, and in the place where I lay I began to weave with all my fingers, with anything I could find, with grass and leaves and branches, and my own hair, and mud and silk and cotton, wet wool and flax and rose thorns, stones and river water, and stripped bark, and tall trunks and evergreen needles. Everything I could touch, I could weave. And as I wove, I could see. I could see what I wove, and no more. With all that light boiling in my eye, I could see what I wove. I could see where every stitch began, in rose seed and flax flower, and where it would end, rotting to dust on the dead body of a witch laid out on her bier, or cut into strips for a child's swaddling clothes in a city which did not yet even have a name. I could see the threads, I could see the warp and the weft. I could see every day a thing that I wove. I could see every day a thing I wove would live. It was so big I wept. And with my weeping and my weaving, my light went out into those webs, these webs which became stones and streets and cornices, bridges and alleys, towers and bells and doors and churches, cutting into each other all at the sharp, cruel angles of a web, turning and twisting around me who sat at its center. And after a while, there was no light left, and my blood went out into the weaving instead. And all the stones and streets and cornices and bridges and alleys, all the towers and bells and churches and doors ran red as they wound out of me. How it hurt, but how it sang as it came. I have always been here. I will always be here. The red city is my weaving, and I rest at its center. Every stone and plank knows it was once in the palms of my hands. I can see where it all will end, all the way through the wind-racked dust and red stones worn to the grains of red sand, and I will be here then too. I knew that folk would come eventually, and marvel at this empty city all ready for them, all laid out and beautiful as a dress. I knew they would be hungry and cruel as little spiders, that they would walk on the grass they were told to leave be, that they would weave and weave and weave until all their days were spooled out before them, red and bright and bloody. The dressmaker's tale continued. They came before the people did, said the weaver's star, indicating the silkworms in their cozy boxes. How far they must have come, crawling on their weak white bellies over tearing, chewing rocks. My darlings, my courtiers, who knew only that which is woven longs for a weaver, and here one lay waiting. The worms wriggled in ecstasy that their mistress deigned to speak of them, and the current of thread redoubled itself, singing through the bowls of dye and into her hands. I have no more light, and no more blood, and my silk is rare and thin these days, but they make enough for anything I might wish to weave, and we are family, they and I am the empress of the alleys. They are silk dreaming of the stars. thought I would burst for love of her then, and her white eyes filled my vision. But if you wove all these wonders, how can you be content to weave a woman's dress? A dress is nothing. Zide looked at the woman on the dais, nearly dressed now, her waist swathed in crimson, crisscrossed with black ropes to match her beads, the skirt clinging to her legs and falling all the way to the floor. I do not understand you, friend spider. How can you say a dress is nothing? Look at her. This thread begins in my silkworms and will end in the mouth of a manticore, who will come to every window in the woven city and sing until she is hoarse, and her voice will sound like a flute and a trumpet playing together, and at one particular window she will sing the saddest song she has ever sung, full of failure and sorrow and love thwarted, and searches which end in dust. It will be so terrible to hear that the whole city will weep. How can this be nothing? Tears in every flower bed, in every filthy sink. But this particular window will open, and this woman will be wearing her crimson dress when she leans out, her smile so wide it would break your heart to see it. Her hair will hang down around her face, and also her beads, and when she calls out the name of the beast, a shower of pearls will fall from her mouth. The manticore will break 3 stairs bounding up to her, will bite her ever so gently on the shoulder when she knocks this woman to the floor in kittenish delight. They will grow very old together, these two. The muzzle of the one and the hair of the other will go quite grey. And when this woman right here, whose dress you call nothing, dies, as die she must, the manticore will sing over her breathless body in such mourning that the city will shudder and groan and remember its first weeping. 7 suicides will fling themselves from the towers in unbroachable anguish in the wake of the lion's dirge. And in grief, the manticore will pull all her mistress's dresses from her armoire, and one by one she will tear them to pieces and eat them, for they will still smell of her, they will still taste of her, and the poor beast will not be able to bear to be apart from anything which recalls this woman whose dress was nothing. Tears rolled down the face of the woman on the dais. Her mouth hung open, and she could not speak, her tears salting the dress, the beads, her breath ragged and hoarse. Yet through it she smiled, and clasped her bead-strung hands to her lips. The tale of the waste continued. The black-veiled woman and the leopard lay curled together on the cracked earth, listening. The spotted cat lashed her tail back and forth. In the place where we come from, which is called Urim, no one may go clothed in anything other than the black robes and veils you see draped over my lady. We cannot, between us, imagine such a dress. Nor could I, said Scald, her smoke calm and flowing slowly in a circuit that began at the crown of her head and flowed all the way around to the tip of her mere tail. Jinn sometimes wear outlandish things if they are kings or queens or kaigas. But we can bank our flames into any sort of clothes we should desire, and more often than not this will outshine even the richest cloth. But I cannot see where the cloth of my body will end, and that would be a useful trick. In Urim, we know each other only by our eyes, and every window is also curtained in black. That would seem to me dreary and morose, the Jinn said. It certainly seems so to us. But then Urim is the funereal city, and we cannot act against our character. The Jinn said nothing, her eyes flashing flame. She put her black hands to the bars of the cage. Yet you are not dead, and you flee that black-slung place. The cat smiled in such a way as cats will smile. The tales of the dead are all the same. We are interested in yours, who live and burn. Skald shook her head. You are very strange, Rend, and your mistress is stranger still. So says a fire fiend caged in iron. She could surely melt any time she wished, answered the leopard smoothly. Quite so, said the Jinn. The dressmaker's tale continued. I cannot understand why she let me stay. I am a spider and no more. Yet she bade me sit beside her and tell her of the glass and the poisoner and the poor sirens. She never ceased her weaving, but she laughed at the right parts and caught her breath at the right parts, just as though she heard me and could have a care for the travails of spiders. And she called me Sleeve. She meant for me to learn the value of dresses, she said. And so I did. I listened to her tales of each garment, the green stocking for the monopod who would tear his sock to emerald shreds on the thorns of saltberry trees in the Antipodes, the black coat for the Ajahn undertaker who would marry the day before he died, and be both wed and buried in this coat, the wispy white dress woven almost entirely of my own silk, my humble spider's silk, for the duke's wife who would burn it all up into ash the day her child was born, the wings woven of horsehair and rose petals for the mask-maker's son who wanted to see what Ajanab looked like from above. These he would hide from his father under the floor, hide them for so long they would turn to dust and brown petals beneath a green carpet. I listened to the stories as carefully as I studied the patterns, and in the company of a star I learned all that it is right and proper for a spider to do. In the church that was not a church, there were mice. This is not really surprising, all churches are so plagued. Outside the radiant seat where Zide wove, and the rows of silkworm boxes, the place was terribly dusty and ill-kept. Dust covered everything, turned it grey and dun and dull. After all, it is a rare celestial who will notice the state of the floor. Only I, who walked upon it, noticed, and in the corners where the mice lived, the dust was so thick and deep that if I was not careful, I would sink into it like soft ash and never be heard from again. The mice were much bigger, and walked through this fog of dust as though it were air, and saw little at all but the varying shades of dust, and became like roving draughts of dust themselves. I spoke to them from time to time, for they were in awe of the weaver's star and her worms and her spider, and dared not approach her, but they longed to touch her. Ah, how they longed to touch her. One was very large, his muscles trained on dust wading. Deep in the summer evening, he said to me, stroking his whiskers with grey paws, "She is so bright." I suppose she is. Imagine what she looked like in the beginning, though. All that light. The mouse frowned. "She is brighter than anything we know," he said. "She's no brighter than you or I. Her light is spooled out thread by thread." "She is bright on the inside," the mouse snapped irritably. "We've been talking in the dust, and we think we would like to eat her." I could not speak for a moment. My voice closed up in horror. "Is this what comes of living in the dust? You cannot eat her." "If we all bit her at once, we could." "I will not allow it." The mouse grinned. "You have enough poison for 5, perhaps 6 of us, if you're very angry. But the rest of us would get to drink all of her. How bright, how sweet, how bright we would become." "Please, you cannot. What would we be without her?" "You may be what you like. We will be bright, bright as no mouse has dreamt." The tale of the kingdom of the mice. "In the beginning there was dust, and in the end there will be dust, and in the middle there is dust, dust, dust. The church mice know that dust is the substance of all possible things. We have heard that in the impossible land beyond the church door there are folk who believe that fire is the substance of all things, or water, or ether, or tiny specks of light no one can see. We cannot believe such folly exists. Though there are some of us who have heard, if only they never begun to imagine such a thing. Some of us have heard there is a burning ball outside these walls called the sun, and it is the brightest thing there is. We will eat it too, if it exists. In the dust nothing is bright. There is only the grey and the dun and the soft ashy smell of it brushing your whiskers at every moment. We hate it, but we did not know for a long time how it could be escaped. When I was a pinky at my mother's teat, I heard the old grey uncles talking about Baldtail, who was the viceroy of mice in days gone by, for there can be no king of the dust, which is all there is, which gives us life and death. Dust is king over us all. Baldtail was brave, the bravest mouse the dust will ever allow. He, cloaked in dust, went forward from the corners, as viceroys sometimes do, being valiant rulers who do not shirk adventure. He saw the worms in their boxes, perversion, and the threads waving in the copper bowls which surround the weaver. He rose up on his hind legs to peer into the bowls, to see what they could contain, and his whiskers whickered back and forth, showering bits of dust into the bowl. As I have said, Baldtail was brave, and so he rashly rose up on his tiptoes and pulled the copper bowl over onto himself, and the dye, which is the magical alien stuff the weaver keeps by her side, soaked him from his paws to the end of his bare tail. He was yellow from eyeball to ear twitch, a brighter yellow even than this thing they call the sun could possibly be. The dye washed away the dust, and alone of all mice, Baldtail was free of it. Baldtail shed the substance of mortality and became golden. Baldtail returned to the dust-pillowed corners and told all the mice what he had seen and what he had done. At first they recoiled from his yellow body in revulsion and terror. He hurt their eyes, which had never seen anything but dust, and their fellow mice roving in the dust, lumps of grey among the grey, but there Baldtail blazed. Yellow! Can you imagine the uproar, the consternation? There were now two things in the universe, dust and yellow. The more the mice looked at Baldtail, the more they envied him. One or two ventured to lick his gleaming fur with their pink tongues flashing through dust-covered teeth. He tasted so bright, they said, so bright and so warm. For his part, Baldtail exhorted us to go forth too and discover the bowls for ourselves. The weaver sees nothing but her thread and her worms, he argued. She won't hurt us. Become bright. Become other than dust. But we were afraid of the weaver then. She seemed so very large and cunning. But it was decided that we should become bright after all. So we all agreed, in the corners of the corners, to eat Baldtail all up. Then we should all be yellow, triumph over the dust. We waylaid the viceroy in the thickest, dankest mires of dust, and with our teeth tore him haunch from long, bald tail. He tasted like any other mouse. But oh, how it felt! We could feel his brightness in us, his yellow. He slid in our bellies like butter, like we dreamt the sun would slide. Those of us who ate of Baldtail were exalted among mice. We began to think as no other mouse had done. What if there were more than two things in the universe? What if there were more than dust and yellow? We could not begin to calculate what these things might be, but we hungered for more brightness, more light, more yellow. Those mice who had not yet tasted yellow mourned their loss, and they were more eager than any of us to find other things. Some few of them went out from the corners and tilted her bowls over their heads. They came running back, scampering with glee to show us that a thing called green existed too, and also the almost unfathomable purple. We gasped, we choked in awe and ecstasy. We could not believe the universe had room for these things and also dust. And we leapt upon them and slurped green and purple from their fur like meat from bone, and of course we did slurp meat from bone too. Those were heady days. I cannot begin to tell you of the feast of red. But we do not wish to waste any more time lapping at her bowls. Why beg for crumbs when the roast is in plain sight? We know that the weaver is the source of all yellowness, all greenness, all purpleness, all redness, all that is not dust. We will eat her up as we ate up Baldtail and Black Whisker and Dust Belly and Manglepaw, and how bright we shall be then. The Dressmaker's Tale continues. The mouse licked his chops and wrung his grey paws. What will she taste like? Will she taste like mouse? I trembled under his hungry stare. I have seen the sun and the streets and the world outside the church door. Why do you not go into it? I will wedge the door open for you. You may go in all your numbers to the light and see for yourself what the universe is made of. How many other things than yellow and green and purple and red. Do you know what blue is? No. Would it be difficult to chew? The mouse grinned, his dusty teeth showing. Yes, very. I tapped my hind legs desperately, my belly pained and anxious. But come, friend mouse, I said with as much joviality as I could manage. Zide is hardly worth your effort. She's all wrung out, an old cloth. Come with me into the world outside the church door, and all your brethren too, and I will show you the very brightest things there are. I will weave whatever you like into beauty and color and light, and you will find that you can be brighter than lamps without eating anything untoward. There are many roads to brightness. The mouse looked doubtful. I have heard that in the world outside it is easy to become stepped upon or swatted with a broom. We wish to be bright. We wish to be bright and great so that no one may step upon us or do anything to us with brooms. I considered this for a long time, tears forming in my manifold eyes. I think I know how you may have all you like, and still leave the weaver in her place, uneaten and unknown. I went to Zide and rested in the hollow of her elbow, as full of sorrows as a web is of flies. For now I knew, being a proper spider, that what flies were for and webs, and I understood why the flies had not wanted to speak to me. I told her all I had heard and all I intended. She smiled sadly, her white eyes gleaming, and let her lips fall, ever so gently, onto my back. It felt like moonlight, and I was at peace. I began to weave many things in preparation for my leaving, for the exodus of the Mice Kingdom. First I wove green stockings and sold green boots in pew wood. I wove a long black wig of glossy curls. I sent to the mask-maker's slums for a mask of gold and peacock feathers. And because they begged for it, I wove over days and weeks and months and years, for a spider is still small, and no star, a long jacket all of yellow, with gold thread at every seam. The tale of the cloak of feathers continued. They practiced while I wove, practiced piling one mouse onto another in extraordinary shapes. First a cat, because they are perverse, then a dog, then a wolf, then a lion, then, when they could open a mouth of mice and roar in such a way that it terrified the rafter doves and sent a rain of white feathers to the floor, they carefully built themselves into the form of a man. And on their squirming shoulders I helped them arrange their yellow coat, and around their crawling head I strapped their mask of gold, and onto their wriggling legs I pulled stocking and boot. They elected the mouse who had struck the deal with me to be the voice of the golem. He asked me to give them a good name, which had nothing whatever to do with whiskers or tails or paws. I suggested Kostya, the name of the Ajahn undertaker. Perhaps this was wishful on my part. But you will leave Zide be? I asked desperately. If you keep us supplied with diverting brightnesses, we will surely let her live, Kostya allowed magnanimously. And so I keep them in colors, and they leave the heart of Ajahn unmolested. I give them a cloak of your feathers and beg your forgiveness, but I cannot let the smallest tooth nibble at her hand. Sleeve sniffed a bit and pulled one of her needle legs upward sharply, tightening a golden thread. As for my legs, you must have guessed by now, Folio did it, who authors all the wonders of Ajahn, of which I am but a small and secret member. I asked her to, I begged her to be worthy of Zide, and in this you will find a common tale in every quarter and parish of the city. I paid her with more of my silk than I have ever spun out of my body. I was near dead with the effort, But she needed so much to improve her daughter's joints, you see. Sleeve clapped her forelegs together merrily. It is strange to think how much of her child is made from the beloved possessions of the Ajahn. She grants wishes like a djinn, but oh, she takes and takes in return. Which is, I suppose, also like a djinn. I wanted to weave more than webs. She obliged me. I was such delicate work, she said. What will he do with me when my tail is gone? The spider said nothing, clicking her needles together wretchedly. Perhaps you should remember my poisoner, she ventured hesitantly. Where do you find this loyalty? I cried. I cannot remember your poisoner. My cage is fast, and the feathers he owns bind me. Not so your little glass of days gone by, not so your needles. Do something if you hate him so. Unlock my cage, bite him, do not serve him pitifully as though you can do nothing else. I rattled the blackened bars in frustration, but Sleeve simply regarded me coolly, her threads waving. Do all large creatures think this way, as though their travails are the tragedies of the world and the suffering of the small is nothing compared to their own? Certainly Kostya thinks so, now that he casts a long shadow. He does not mark me any longer. I am an 8-legged machine with no other purpose than to manufacture brightness in his sight. From where he towers, he cannot even see me. But he told you there are corners here, and where there are corners, there are mice. And all mice live in awe of what he has accomplished, he who walks among men in such beautiful clothes. He does not need to watch me. They watch. They hear. A bell is a cage as sure as your own. She shook her head. I am not so bright as you, but I still bleed and bear up under him for her sake. Abashed, I lay back on my cushions. The cage rocked and the rafter groaned under its weight. The night pooled black on the thin floorboards. Sleeve's voice echoed again from the bell, thoughtful and rasping. The thread I use in your cloak is not from your feathers. It is the reddest of red golden silk, and I helped Zita to spin it out from the worms in their boxes. And she has told me, she always tells me, where the thread will end. Would you like to know? Yes, I said weakly. Little Sleeve, she whispered. She is so considerate, not to hurt me with loudness, as many others do. You would not believe where this thread will end. All the way through your little body, through to a cradle in the night, into swaddling clothes and a child's only comfort. But it will not end even there. It is a gift from sister to sister, and there is so much fire to come. So much fire, so much light. And so I think you should remember my poisoner and take heart. There was no more from the bell, though I waited and strained to hear the smallest thing, but there was nothing. The bell tower was hushed and still. In due time, the mouse man returned to snatch another fistful of feathers from my tail. He sang and pranced in glee. I did not scream, but whimpered and wept, and the circle beneath the cage grew, and so my days and nights went, with a spider at my ear and mice at my cage door. Once or twice I thought I saw the flash of gray fur or tiny black eyes behind the gaping holes of his mask. I am very large, but a cloak is thick with layers, and when my tail was gone, and I was naked and shamed, it was still not enough. Thus I had to wait, and so did he, until it grew back and could be plucked over again. Sleeve, being but a little seamstress, could only weave so fast. Between these two happenstances, the weaving of the cloak spanned more than 2 years. I felt myself growing dim and old with loss of blood and flight and sour golden tears. 3 times he plucked my tail, and in the meantime the bell tower became piled with shining things, with jars of silver and braziers of copper, with coins and endless jackets, all of yellow, and each brighter still than the others, with bolts of cloth that seemed to glow, with fruit that sparkled in the firelight, and the remains of this I was allowed to eat when Kostya had finished. Apples and pomegranates and plantains and slick, wet dates. Occasionally, true to his word, there were mice, snatched from the corners of the tower and dangled into my cage. Why should he weep over mice who had not eaten yellow or green, who had not been reared in the dust, who did not live in his casing of silk? Finally, when I had no strength left, so often had I been plucked and stripped, so often had my joy and my will gone floating up into the bell, Kostya came home from his evening sport, shaking and giggling with anticipation. I could hardly lift my head without him ordering me to do so. "Lantern, perk up. It is ready, I'm sure it is. The brightest thing I've ever known. I shall be brighter even than you." I thumped my sparse red tufts feebly. A few sparks crackled against the bars. "What a sullen little brat you are," he admonished, adjusting his golden peacock mask. Sleeve, is not my cloak ready? Send it down. I've waited so long. You promised. If you do not present it immediately, I shall run at quick speed all the way back to the church door." Out of the rim of the bell came a sheen of gold, which grew and grew. Even I was stunned, dazzled by it. The cloak of feathers, finished beyond imagination, so long that it would flare out behind the wearer in a regal pool of feathery silk. It shone with gold and red and orange and white, each feather layered upon others, the eyelets almost too bright to look at. It had a little stiff collar of my shortest feathers, which would cuff the face jauntily, and it glowed with my own light, my own colors, fringed and lovely, lovely beyond the dreams of the highest-born tailor. I could not imagine a queen, an emperor, a dandy who would not be made small and mean and dark in that cloak. It was like the very sun woven into the shape of shoulders. Kostya squeaked in ecstasy, but as he examined it closely, he began to frown. "It was brighter before," he groused. Sleeve ran down the length of the hanging cloth, still wavering from the bell. "His feathers will only flame when they're attached. He is the fire, not they. But he's too big to wear as a shoulder brooch. No cloak has ever been made which could be its equal, Kostya, my friend." She clicked her needles and swallowed hard. "You are brighter even than she," she spat finally. And at that, Kostya leapt into the air, dancing a jerky but joyful little step, clicking his emerald-booted heel against his emerald-stockinged calf. "Help me then," he giggled. "Help me put it on." He stepped into the cowl of the cloak, and Sleeve, with her needle legs and a great deal of struggle, heaved the shimmering thing over Kostya's squirming shoulders, ignoring his chirps of lust and the wriggling of his gloved fingers. It lay on him like a huge, fiery hand, and in the moment that Sleeve pulled the left side up onto his body and fastened the clasp of my own talon, clipped and carved, the man of mice began to scream. He writhed in the cloak, but his mask kept his face impassive, the little slit of mouth neither moving nor twisting. Terrible and high the first voice came, then hundreds, thousands, shrieking, tinny voices, a chorus of mice in agony. And they began to pour out of the eyes of the mask, out of the mouth, out of the wig, chewing through the green stockings, the boots rushing from the brocaded belly, tearing the yellow coat to filthy shreds. The mice poured out of their body, but as they ran, blind, desperate, they began to die, 2 by 2, falling onto the floorboards with small wretched thumps, 1 by 1. Sleeve ran among them, piercing them with her needles and crying in her own hoarse, thready way, terrified and triumphant. It took a long time for her to make sure they were dead as dust. When she was finished, she hooked the cage key from his polished belt onto one of the legs and dragged it to me. I am not so dexterous with my beak as a rule, but I certainly had the grace to let myself free of that thing which had kept me for years on end. "I've been thinking," panted the spider, "that perhaps mice ought not to be indulged. Perhaps a star does not really need a spider to look after her. Perhaps I've lived in that bell long enough." "I do not understand," I said in wonder, stretching my wings from wall to wall. "It took me 2 years to infuse every feather with my poison. I'm only one spider after all. It steamed with the stuff by the time I was done, though you could not see it. They breathed in my vapors, and in their panic, one can always depend upon the panic of mice, chewed through their clothes and the bottom layer of feathers and swallowed all my poisons as eagerly as they have swallowed everything else. My poison is not bright, but it is quick. Weeping and laughing together, Sleeve and I walked through the wreckage of mice. I crushed them underfoot, one by one, making little rings on the boards like ghastly cups. She sat on my shoulder, stroking my feathers as my breath heaved in grief and relief. When we'd finished, I let my sparkling tufts light the cloak, and we watched it burn, poison leaping bright and green into the flames. We watched it burn until it was clean, and then Sleeve asked me to break the bell. I cannot turn that lock, she said. Surely you will do this thing for me. I looked up into the disappearing rafters, so broken and high that the sky poured in like a bottle of black ink. I gave a few flaps of my wings to meet it, and though without my tail I was awkward, I managed to shiver it to bronze splinters with one blow of my beak. Thank you, Sleeve whispered, and began slowly to walk down the staircase, her satisfied needles clicking all the way down. And we have a splendid illustration of our firebird and our spider. And we will pick up there next week. I probably would have had a little bit more, well, I guess I won't because we don't have any water, but I would have had a little bit more water before I started if I knew it was the dust part. But yeah, so Evil Mice, Vanquish, and SJ has an awesome song that goes with that, so we'll play it in the intro next time. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you. I'm glad that you liked it. Mice can be very nice, and so can spiders. I've heard, I don't truck with spiders myself, but mice can be very nice. They are not all collective evil. Why is the island out of water? You know, it's a great question. There's some kind of main break somewhere. Don't really know. They're working on it. Who can say? It's not a drought. It's just the water system on the island. It's pretty interesting, actually, as these things go. Basically, around the turn of the century, 20th century, not this one, a bunch of the rich people who lived here got tired of well water, and so they raised money and pressured the city council to put a water pipe through the whole bay, all the way here. So we're on city water on this island, unlike every other island in the bay. And so we are because it's an old system and because it's an island and everything has to go under the ocean and everything else. It's quite prone to weird breakages. So this isn't the first time that the water's died, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. It'll probably be back by tomorrow. And if I had known that, I also would have bought more wine at Hannigan's before the store closed. As we all know, wine is a perfectly cromulent substitute for water. No, we're not all well water. We're on city water. Almost everyone here is. There are a few sort of only summer cottages. If you live in New England, you know the term winterized or four-season cottages. Most of the houses here are fit to be lived in every season. Several of them are not. And you would only want to live there in the summer, and they're usually on well water, but we're not. We're on city water. Comes all the way from Lake Sebago. We have very, very nice water. So that has been your municipal engineering portion of the Q&A. I don't actually have any more information than that. Someone on Twitter sent me a picture of like rocks and water and said it's here, but I don't know what that means. So thanks, guy on Twitter, who I'm sure knows what he's talking about, and I'm sure that's a relevant picture, but I just don't understand it. Ooh, running out of well water, that is not good. Yeah, it's living in any of these sort of unusual places is starting to be quite the challenge with not only everything happening in the world and the climate, but COVID and everything else. It's a luxury. I'm not sure how many of us will be able to continue. But I guess that's life in 2020. Yeah, well, there's nothing to be done about it, I suppose. Just have to hope. Hope. Haha, hope. That's funny. Well, I remember that. I remember hope. That felt nice once upon a time. I'll do my little outro thing, and then you guys can ask more questions if you like. You can pop them up in the chat, and I'll get to them in a minute. As always, for legal reasons, this is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales, it is a play. You can get music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can get copies of them from your local independent bookseller. You can find me on Twitter at Kat Valenti, and subscribe to my Patreon at Kat Valenti. There's a big essay I just posted there today. You can find S.J. Tucker and I tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Online Concert Thing, having a big giant concert with material from many of my books and incredible songs from her based on, I think it's 7 different books? More? Not sure. It's going to be something else. I'm not sure we've ever done anything quite as wide-ranging as this, so please tune in. And there'll be exclusive fiction and music for you to grab if you show up from the digital merch table. You can catch up in the archive at Kat Valenti Live on YouTube. This will go up in about an hour and a half. I'm sure I'm forgetting something here. And we will pick up where we left off on Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. And as always, if you would like to toss a coin to your witch, there is a tip jar on my website, katherinemvalenti.com, and on my Instagram profile and my YouTube profile. I will thank anybody who puts the littlest cent in there on the next stream. It is deeply appreciated as we try really hard to weather the rest of the year. Anybody who has given anything to support this reading series is such a deep friend of my heart. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. And that's it. Do I ever weave? I have not actually woven. I have spun, but I have not woven. The City of Cloth in Fairyland. So actually, I didn't do fiber arts or crafts when I was writing this, but by the time I was writing Fairyland, I absolutely did them. I was knitting and crocheting and spinning. So all of the sort of fiber arts stuff in Fairyland is sort of a nod to my social circle full of fiber artists at the time. So they're not connected, but you know, fairy tales have some pretty solid iconic associations with things like weaving, and I liked the idea of sort of all-in-one fate. Yeah, weaving and writing. The warp and the weft is an old terminology for spinning, but the reason that I used it is it's in Catullus, and this whole beautiful poem he wrote about stories and weaving. How is Lord Byron? Lord Byron is fine. He is obsessed with a mouse at the moment, so he will not leave the kitchen. He's being super affectionate with Sebastian, which is extra cute. He is shaved. He's in his skinny jeans mode, as we like to say. And yeah, he's doing okay. He seems to be in a much better mood and place. He was acting kind of odd there for a minute, but he's been to the vet and he's fine. You see he's not been disrupting streams. That's because some nice little mouse is distracting him in the other room. And unfortunately, that nice little mouse will go the way of dust soon enough. Yeah. Anybody else? You know, nobody told me about wearing glasses, that like when you sip something, the glass hits your glasses. It's such an odd thing. Never thought of it. But yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I will see you tomorrow night at 8 p.m. At onlineconcertthing.com. And I will see you on Sunday at 8:30 p.m. All of those are Eastern times. And we'll rock the house down, folk style. Have a lovely evening, guys. I hope things will get better for all of us soon. And I hope we'll have water soon.